got 6. We got
I
6.
know we got 6, but do we get the, there,
Yep.
the camera going on? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor.
You know, this is the time that I love the most. It's the budget time. Woo-hoo! Come on, come on. Come on, there's some of us that care.
Hello.
Really appreciate it. So, good afternoon, and I'd like to call our first council budget workshop for the 2027 budget development into order. As you know, this is one of the most important. Yes, isn't that right, Dimple?
That's right.
Yes. And impactful, isn't that right, James?
Yes.
And developing a plan to allocate the city's resources in our alignment with our strategic priorities and the needs of our community. So we want to thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And with that, let's get started by hearing from the city manager, Marcus Jones. Mr. Jones, it's on for you.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor and members of council. We are kicking off the budget workshop. It's a little different this year. Normally, we have the annual strategy meeting, which really gives us a little bit of guardrails, for lack of a better term, before we go in here. But I think we're going to be okay in the sense of we'll start with broad strokes today. We do have the annual strategy meeting next Monday and Tuesday, where we'll go into a deeper dive. So we think if we can almost pull these two events together, by the time next Tuesday, I think we'll be back on track. With that said, Mayor, unless you have any questions, I'd like to turn it over to the Chair of Budget and Intergovernmental Relations.
Where is he?
He's right
Oh,
there.
I can't see, this is where I cannot see around a curve. So, Mr. Graham, as chair, please.
Yeah, I have brief remarks. I just, on behalf of the committee, Councilmember Owens, Ashmere, Mitchell, Mayo, we bring forward to the manager the opportunity to kick us off with the budget outlook and strategy session. It goes without saying that the budget, our budget, demonstrates the values we have as a community. A lot of work will be done between now and, I guess, May in terms of a wide variety of issues. The city continues to be one of the best managed financial cities in the country, holding out AAA bond rating, great enterprise organizations, great authorities that do well with the citizens' resources, its money. And now our job is to allocate it in a way that best meets the needs of the community. And so the manager will get the first crack at it and his team. We look forward to working with them over the next couple of weeks. And let's get this party started. Mr. Manager?
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what I'll do, council members, is just do 2 slides today and then step away, turn it over to the CFO and Marie and her great staff in the budget office. I thought you'd be celebrating that I only have 2 slides, but I guess not. Okay. So I do want to talk a little bit about the last couple of weeks in Charlotte. We did spend some time having town halls with our employees. A lot of early mornings, CDOT, Charlotte Water, Solid Waste Services, because what we came to understand that while we spent a great deal of time over the course of the last year talking about the 1% sales tax, we didn't necessarily have that same engagement with the 9,000 employees. So not only did we have a conversation about their awareness of it, but also we talked about what's happening in terms of workforce opportunities for our employees, as well as upward mobility opportunities for our employees also. And so it was kind of interesting having the conversations, and it really brought me back to this slide, which was actually in this room, May 2023, and we were talking about the 2024, FY2024 proposed budget. So we were at this inflection point, and there was a lot of concern. We're going to go back one. There's a lot of concern that if we didn't do something different on the revenue side, a lot of the opportunities that were out there for us may be foregone. So either it's business as usual, maybe that middle line, or maybe you would have a decline in our services. But we, after this past November, we think that we're on the upward trajectory in terms of where we're going. Even back in May of 2024, we talked about showing this community what we could do with additional revenue. So I believe I have this right. I think we've raised the property tax once in the last 6 years? 7 years. And the last time we raised it was FY25. And FY25 is really for two purposes: public safety. 9/10 of all that went to public safety. But 0.3 of it, the increase, we put in our CIP because we wanted to test these strategic investment areas. We wanted to test if we had a bigger transportation bond, could we deliver? So Ed McKinney and his team, the entire team, the strategic investment areas, $55 million to test, to pilot. We've understood that we can be more inclusive with businesses. We can do these projects faster and about at a cheaper price. So again, couldn't go out to the community and ask for this 1% sales tax with a business as usual mindset. So we're on the upward trajectory. I would say to the council, just like as we were talking to our employees of the last few weeks, it wasn't lost on me that this council has done some amazing things to get us to this point, including buying a railroad, okay? And so the strength of the strategic area plans, the strategic investment areas, as well as some bold moves by the councils, put us in a very good position. I will tell you this before I turn it over to Marie and team. We ran as hard as we could with the limited resources that we have. And as we go through this fiscal year, I'm not suggesting that anything's wrong. What I am suggesting is the previous year, spoiler alert, our surplus was razor thin. We're going to have to manage this budget to get to FY27 where we get that boost of revenue. And we've proven that there are some things that we could do in terms of a project delivery faster and cheaper. And with that said, I turn it over to Marie and team.
Thank you, City Manager. And good evening, or good afternoon. And like the manager pointed out, a solid financial foundation and focus on the core services, that's where we've been, and that's been the basis for our progress moving forward. And a big part of our financial foundation is our management AAA. We've gotten it for decades, and it's the highest we can achieve from the bond rating agencies, and it shows that we really have strong financial and budgeting policies and practices in place. And this one's, so why does our community, you know, we talk about the AAA bond rating, it sounds great to the people that know what that means, but what does that mean to our community? So for our community, it's a couple things. It's a seal of that we have a financial seal of approval, basically. We're exceptionally strong financial stability, so that should give our community not just us saying we're great and we're managing your money, but that external, we're rated and sealed that we're doing well, both in our financial policies, also our practices. And also the community, if I was a community member, beyond just saying, okay, you're good financially, it also, this AAA also helps us to save money. So by having a higher credit rating, we are able to pay less in debt. So more of the taxpayers' dollars are actually going to the project versus paying debt service on the projects. So those are two important points for our community. And also, not only that, but we're a good value. And we show this slide, and this is just one glimpse into all the benchmarking and analysis we do behind the scenes. But as you'll notice, Charlotte is lowest among the larger cities in North Carolina and one of the lowest altogether as terms of cost to a typical household for municipal services. So this includes city and county property tax, wastewater, water, stormwater, solid waste, and local sales tax for a typical homeowner. So not only are we strong financially, we're a good value. And how do we do this? We're structurally balanced. You know, a lot of people see we get a little bit of money or we can do great things with it, but we have to always be mindful and make sure ongoing expenses do not exceed ongoing revenues. If we get one-time money, that's great. We can do a pilot or we can do a one-time project. But to add a service or an ongoing program, we need to make sure we're having ongoing revenues to support that. And also fully funded reserves. You know, we go above and beyond. The guidance says 8%, we do 16%, and that's a big piece of our AAA rating because we're really secure financially. And Hannah's going to get more into maintaining capital affordability and long-term steady state. And the next slide's more in the first two. So when we're closing out a fiscal year, when all the dust settles from all the expenses and the revenues coming in, hopefully we have a surplus. And then when we have that surplus, the first thing we do, though, to maintain that 16%, as you recall, is really important to our AAA and just to our shoring up our future. We have to take out 16% of the cost of the growth in the general fund for the projected growth for the next year. And then Matt works his magic with the external consultants and says, you know, the dust settled, but is there any other dust in the air that may come up that we haven't accounted for? And they determine another figure to set aside. So it's double security. And then after that, anything that falls to the balance, we put forward to the next year's, well, it's two, by the time you close the book. So for 25, what we're showing is for 27, and that goes into your pay-go. Well, there's other sources of pay-go, but they are programmed, and then when we have this one-time, again, we can use a one-time source for a one-time project, and council's used those for a lot of innovative things in the past. And the spoiler alert, the manager mentioned, we have none, basically, no unprogrammed pay-go from fiscal year end 25. That would go towards it. And we're really tight for the next year. But this just shows, you know, like the budget principles, you're not expected to see these. These are in your book as well. But this is one of the main ones. Budget will maintain general fund balance of 16%, and the remainder will go to the pay-go. And then, of course, we do have a $3.65 billion budget overall, but this section is mainly focused on the $943.5 million general fund. We'll also talk about a little bit about the internal services fund down there at the bottom that's more behind the scenes but foundational. But so when we say 365 right now, we're focused on the general fund. And where do we get the money? So how do we fund the general fund? Mostly through property tax, over half through property tax, sales tax, cost reimbursements from non-general funds, utility franchise fees, solid waste fees, and then there's a slew of other smaller revenues from cemetery fees to your pet fees for animal care and control, all types of fees that make up the balance. And with that, as we said, property tax is over half of our revenues for the general fund. But if you look at this as more of our benchmarking, over in the tax rate, we have the lowest tax rate among the cities surveyed. Wilmington's like right on us at like 28.25 cents. And also, as the manager mentioned, we've only had one tax increase, property tax increase over this time frame, and you can see some of our peers have capitalized on that a lot more frequently. And then that's where the money comes from, and then what's the plan to spend the money? So this is a picture of our current year budget, and as you'll notice, it's over half of it, 61%, is public safety. Some notable parts are street lighting. Before that wasn't as big of an item, but we get more and more street lights, was great, and also the cost to light those street lights keeps going up, so that's one that's emerging, is notable to call out on its own now. And so that's the plan on how we're going to spend. But when the plan hits the road, sometimes there's some bumps, and we're working through those. We've had some pressures in this year's budget. We've had overtime needed to meet service demands. We have aging fleet and delivery delays that create increased maintenance costs. And, you know, when we have ice storms, you know, usually we have some wiggle room, but we have a little bit less wiggle room this year. So, and those storm-related expenses, we budget for the baseline, not peaks like the storm time. So those had to be absorbed as well. So we have a very tight budget right now, but we will manage it within the budget. And then next, so that was the current year. Now we're rolling current year into planning for the next year's budget that you'll adopt. So for 2027, we're excited. It's going to be a transformational year. Like the manager mentioned, we hadn't heard from all your discussions at the strategy session yet, but you've already clearly told us Mobility Plus is a top priority, enhanced public safety, small business development, affordable housing, and workforce development. We've heard you loud and clear. The manager already has those on his radar, and we're looking forward to hearing more from you at the strategy session as far as your top priorities. And the manager mentioned some about the town halls. He's been working with his executive team and managers and staff across the city to really instill a team of teams approach. So it's not just this division's resources. How do we share resources, money, and staff to really meet the needs of the community? Expanding partnerships, and the manager spoke some on shoring up core services. We've been running, putting gas in the car, but we need to make sure all the components and everything's got what it needs to keep us going. So shoring up core services is going to remain a focus. Capitalizing on technology advances and piloting new initiatives. And that's always, we always look at best practices and new initiatives. What can we employ and do better and capitalize on anything coming down? And then exploring cost recovery options will continue to be a focus. And we mentioned the tight budget pressures. Well, those are going to be considerations when we're building the budget for 2024 or proposing a budget for 2027. The core operational systems and equipment, we need investments to effectively deliver the city services, technology replacement and modernization. Even though y'all all know about technology, it's very expensive and it's outdated quickly. So that's an area that we always have to maintain and monitor. Rolling stock and equipment, staff overtime and public safety and solid waste. We have a focus on filling vacancies, and it also helps to reduce overtime. And next year we'll look at potential impacts that may be due to storm response since they're not recoverable. And we're also increasing cost of fleet maintenance will be a focus when we're looking at 2027. Delivery time on fire engines, it used to be a year and a half, and we thought that was forever. And now we look at more like from when you order it to when you accept it, it's like 4 years. So if you can imagine, you have to plan ahead, and then while you're waiting 4 years to get your new vehicles, it costs so much more to maintain older vehicles, and that creates higher maintenance costs. And I mentioned we'd also touch on the internal service funds. Those are essential. It's not the general fund, but these are essential behind the scenes pieces that we really have to pay attention to and make sure these funds are healthy. The Employee Health and Life Fund, the Risk Management Fund, and the Fleet Fund are ones that we're also going to have to review and keep an eye on, because these are very important to us in our core services, but also the rating agencies pay attention to these as well. And just when we're talking about paying attention to these funds, this is just, the main point of this is, yes, medical and pharmacy costs continue to rise. So that's a factor, each budget cycle. But this is just to highlight that these are real numbers, how it does continue to climb. And these are total costs for the city and the employees, so it's not just impacting us, it's impacting our employees and the health of that fund. And then Christina Fath, Sheila Simpson, and they routinely listen to what employees need and want the most and try to tailor the best benefits packages for them. And they also work across the industry standards and with consultants to see, how can we maintain that balance of being able to afford long-term and meet the needs of our employees. And the main thing of this, too, is employees are one of our top priorities, and we want to keep investing in them for sure, but it does cost money, and that's a choice we think is right, but that's a choice. and it does cost money. And we want to make sure and highlight some of the other things that Human Resources does for the employees. Our core focus is on employees, but also not just the paycheck. We pay people, of course, and that's what people care about a lot, but we also provide health and wellness benefits that are amazing in a lot of ways and a lot of options. And like I said, even Christine and her teams try to adjust those as much as possible based on hearing from employees and what's most important to them. We have financial support opportunities, financial counseling. We have education assistance and even housing resource assistance. And the reason I'm bringing this up is just it costs money to invest in employees, but it is really important, and we look at all the ways that we can invest in employees, and we assume that's going to be a focus moving forward into 2027. But before you can do anything new and different, you have to look at your baseline cost. So if you look at this stack, it represents our current costs on these sides, and on the right you'll see the projected growth. So contractual growth, that could be our help desk contract, our tipping fees that we have to pay the county, any contracts that we have to have in place, and we know they're growing, healthcare and retirement growth, and annualizing pay actions. So just our baseline, keep the lights on, we're looking at 3.3 roughly growth, so that's $31.5 million growth in our baseline. And then when you look at that, you say, okay, what's our revenue projections? And we do conservative revenue growth, and this is based on mid-year, and so we're actively analyzing and looking at things. But right now, there's roughly a $3.8 million gap moving into next year in terms of here's our baseline, keeping our services the same, and our current our current revenue base. But that will be managed, and it's important to note too, this does not include a pay plan. This is just keeping things going as they are. And this is so it's 3.8. That's a little steeper than prior years. Last year it was $500,000 to the good. But we are always analyzing our services and our accounts to make sure not only are we meeting the basics, but we're also aligning resources to what council sees as the main priorities. And then we're very much looking forward to hearing from you more at the retreat and being able to determine how to to optimize the use of the city resources. And then I'm going to turn it over to hopefully more exciting beyond baseline services, compensation considerations, and Ethan Smith's going to walk you through those.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Ethan Smith. I'm the Assistant Director of Strategy and Budget. And I get to talk a little bit about some of the exciting things we do to attract the best and the brightest here to Team Charlotte. So the city has had some pretty aggressive pay plans in recent years, which is a fairly expensive thing for an organization our size, between $19.9 million and $26.4 million. And we were able to do that with some significant growth, particularly in sales tax in FY22 and 23 that we were able to reinvest in our employees in the FY23 and 24 enhanced pay plan. Then, of course, in FY25, we had property tax increase that provided the ongoing revenue needed to have another enhanced pay plan. FY26 required a little more creativity. For public safety, similar to how we do for general employees who reach the max or top step, we offered them a 1.5% lump sum, and because it was a one-time, that allowed us to use one-time revenues. For general employees, the pay plan returned closer to the 3% that was typical prior to some of the severe inflation we've seen in recent years. But of course, hourly was still a point of emphasis for us. So we added an additional percent to that, to 4% total. And then we split the pay increase between a 1.5% market adjustment or across the board pay increase, and then 2.5% as in a merit pool, which allowed management and supervisors to reward really those higher performing employees. And then, of course, we increased minimum pay to $24 an hour. It's the 5th year we've made such an increase. And that really is the best practice, kind of that slow, steady, methodical approach to increasing minimum pay, preventing some of the compression issues that you'd see in kind of any one-time major adjustment to those minimum pay. Even without including the one-time component of this, the pay plan costs $17.8 million, which is a little bit more expensive than traditional pay plans before this time, when adding premiums for things like shift differential, CDL, expanding eligibilities for certain incentives. Those are continued to pay dividends with employees. Employees are earning those new steps even this year and projected for next. And those increases compound on one another. And so we're glad to see that our FY26 pay plan is keeping pace with inflation, exceeding inflation, even keeping pace at its peak in September when inflation reached 3%. And so this is certainly something we will continue to monitor along with the job market more broadly as we go to prepare the FY27 proposal. But of course, this is only part of what we do to compensate employees each year. The city contributes you can see this is the 3 pension systems that we have, and this is what the cost of benefits are for our average employee in each of those systems. And that includes, of course, the employer contribution to those employee pensions, but also other benefits as well, like health care, 401k, our extra 2% for sworn fire, and therefore 57B, and then, of course, federal insurance and Medicare taxes. And so obviously these costs have grown fairly substantially. And while it's certainly not the same as the weekly paycheck for our employees, it goes to fund benefits that are of tremendous value for our employees, both in the short term and the long term. And so you can see the cost nearly doubled for fire, 97% increase, and then increased by nearly 50% for sworn and police. And just give you an idea of how that balances with the salary compensation. For every dollar that we provide in salary compensation, it amounts to about 38 to 48 cents in compensation on the benefit side. And so we're certainly committed to making sure these are funded, as Marie described. This is one of the first things we try and make sure is shorn up as we were building the budget. Remaining a competitive employer of choice is always top of mind for us. So we look internally for areas of emphasis or opportunity at our vacancy rates. One way we do this, of course, we're always looking at individual jobs, vacancy rates for police officer, equipment operator, technician, things like that. But we also zoom out a little bit here at kind of the broader categories: sworn police, hourly overall, sworn fire. For the most part, vacancies are trending well, and this is driven by recruitment and retention. On the recruitment side, we've had a lot of innovation, particularly in the general employee space, with things like our E2E program, Educate to Employ program, our Career Training Academy. And then I realize fire looks a little confusing here. Fire department added 99 sworn positions in FY24 and 25. So what that dotted line shows is just positions that we had to include in the budget to recruit, prepare for new companies that were going to be activated, but that were not yet activated, answering calls for service yet. And the chief, to his credit, has done a great job recruiting, not just enough to handle the resignations and the biggest factor, which are the retirements that we've got to keep up with and have enough graduates to fill, but also filling those new companies while maintaining a relatively low vacancy rate. So,
Ethan,
we'll talk,
do you mind if I tag in for a second?
please.
Okay, thanks, Ethan. So, Mayor and members of council, I think this is really important because if you go back to 2022, we were all concerned about these high vacancy rates. Sheila would be asked, what is a typical standard? I think Sheila came back to 10% or something like that. But this goes to show that all of your decisions around employees and benefits, not just salary, but some of the things you did, like absorbing the increase in the health care as opposed to spreading it to the employees, has really positively impacted where we are right now with the vacancy rate. I couldn't imagine back in 2022 that we'd be at 6.8% with the general hourly. So again, the things like what we have done, or you have done for the employees, anything from down-home assistance payments to how we handle health care is just employee focused, and I think that's really important. The other thing I'll say is that, as I mentioned earlier, FY26, we did about all we could do, and even in the compensation that Ethan showed you a couple slides before, it wasn't as much as the $26 million. It was closer to $20 million, and that was offset by $7 million of reductions across the departments to actually try to help pay for the compensation increase. So just trying to connect the dots that we got to a better place today, and it has a lot to do with the policies that the council has set out. Thank you.
I just wanted to respond to the manager. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Manager. This graph shows that we've certainly invested, and that shows how the vacancy rate has gone down. But if you look at police, we are back to almost where we were back in 2021 in terms of the vacancy rate. So 0.7% difference. So certainly I think that is an area that we need to certainly consider, as the chief said at the hearing, that we are falling behind when we compare our city to other neighboring towns and municipalities. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll talk more about police specifically in the coming slides, but really the main reason for the uptick in police, it occurred decades ago when we added a lot of new officer positions, brought those folks on, and those folks are coming to retirement age. So each year between 80 or 90 officers retire, with the one exception in 24 when had a little reprieve. It was closer to around 60 that retired, allowed us to catch up a little bit. So we talked a little bit about the recruitment side. On the retention side, retention is up in most categories. And this is a trend that we see broadly in the economy, but to the manager's point, I think City Council and the manager deserve some credit for some decisive pay actions in recent years to really boost that retention. Police recruitment, of course, is top priority as we work to fill those existing positions. Here, the chart illustrates the surge, which we knew was ambitious and we knew would require some effort, considerable effort to sustain. But again, we need to recruit enough, not just to graduates, not just to exceed the pace of resignations, but also those retirements, and then begin to tick away at those existing positions. So we'll talk a little bit more, before we talk a little bit more about the things we do to remain competitive, for public safety employees. Just a quick primer on our public safety pay plan and how it works. Every year where there's ongoing revenue to support compensation increases, those increases come for public safety employees mostly in the form of a step. Usually just one step. There was a year we did a double step, and that was to make up for a year in the past where we'd skipped a step. But for new folks that come in, this is really kind of what it looks like over time. A recruit comes in, and like in any job in the city, they come in below the market rate while they gain experience, exposure, and the step plan in particular is designed to really push them up to that market rate with 5% steps early in their career. And so this is just a chart to kind of show what that looks like as they move up to market rate and then ultimately to a top step. It takes around 8 years for fire, 9 for police. This is just firefighter 1 and 2. And so this chart just shows what that looks like for employees. And I think it's a great example of how we kind of offer more than just a job, but a career with growth opportunities. And when you talk about, 62% increase for police, 47% increase for fire, $27,000 increase. And that's without any kind of cost of living adjustment, which, as you know, most pay plans include cost of living adjustment. In 26, it was 1.5%. Then on top of that, our education incentives have been a core compensation philosophy for us, so much so that we will pay for employees to go back and earn their degree. And for those who do, or for those who come with a degree, we'll pay a premium to do the same job. And then other things can compound onto this as well. We have, depending on the employee, maybe they speak a second language or have access to a shift differential or some sort of special assignment pay, or maybe they go on to get promoted. Put all together, and we believe we have a variety of very attractive career opportunities. So how do we make sure we remain competitive for the most talented public safety employees? HR conducts a compensation benchmarking study every 2 years. Since 2019, this is the 4th iteration of that. We shared these results with the Public Safety Pay Committee a couple weeks ago. And here's some takeaways, some areas where we excel or are competitive. Fire trainee, fire captain, lieutenant, police and fire command staff. And then our education incentive, again, which point of emphasis for us, we have some of the strongest incentives there. And of course, as we've shared with the Public Safety Committee, and as I'm sure they would agree, there's always areas for us to improve. And some of those that emerged were, starting pay for police officer, firefighter, engineer. A lot of our peers have a real array of special assignment pays, anything from drone unit to horse patrol to bike patrol that for whatever reason we don't offer. So maybe there's some opportunities there for us to explore. And then finally, the biggest takeaway for me was just that a lot of our peers have a pretty significant differential between that starting recruit pay before graduation and then officers and firefighters after graduation. And so to credit to HR, working with the Public Safety Pay Committee to really kind of work on that and look at that a little bit differently. And just to illustrate kind of what I'm talking about here, here's us benchmarked for recruits and trainees against our peers who also have a flat rate like we do. And you can see police recruit below national average, while fire is slightly above. And then you can see, sorry, wrong way. Then you see Charlotte here, the same rate as recruit and trainee on the previous slide, which, since we don't change, puts us further behind the national average for police, below average for firefighter at that starting pay. And then at the top pay for both officer and firefighter pay, we are below the national average, but above the average in the Southeast. And I think it's important to note these charts are all without any education pay incentives, which again is an emphasis for us. So we rank a little bit higher when you factor those in, but bigger picture here, this is following 34% increases to starting pay since 2019. Similar increases at the top, even 40% for police. And so suffice it to say, there's been a real nationwide escalation on competition for public safety employees. And in that environment, we're always going to consider ways in which we can enhance further. And here is our current slate of pay incentives. And for example, a couple years ago, we implemented a shift differential. We expanded our associate's degree incentive to include qualifying military service, with some input from the Public Safety Pay Committee. And so maybe there are opportunities for us to do something like that again. And you can see below our examples offered by some of our peers. And so as we do every year, we'll evaluate ongoing revenues and what that can support, and with input from the Public Safety Pay Committee, including maybe any structural changes to the public safety pay plan, any changes in incentive pay or anything like that we just discussed. And then for general employees, we're reviewing the pay structure, ensuring that jobs are competitively aligned to the market, addressing any kind of specific recruitment or retention issues that might emerge, and then, as always, evaluating some considerable growth in healthcare to make sure we're striking that right balance but in total compensation. So with that, I will hand it over to Hannah to talk about next steps, unless there are questions.
All right, let's see, are there any questions? This has been a lot to do and read and understand. I appreciate that so very much. I was just recently out of town, and I was with over 15 mayors, and almost every one of them had some concern about having the ability to have people to serve as police officers and firefighters. And so I want to, really say the same thing that Ethan said, which is a lot of this is going on across the country right now, and it is a really difficult way to deal with this. So I know that that's something that we're going to have to look at carefully. So, Mr. Mitchell?
Mayor, thank you. Just one follow-up question as relates to the public safety, and our great Chief Patterson mentioned in her testimony in Raleigh, which she did an excellent job, but she mentioned vacancies. I think it'd be helpful to council as we have this budget discussion if we can get a list of those vacancies, because I think public safety is a top priority for all of us. So just to see whether, I think 269?
Something like that.
Officers
And so if she could share that list with us, I think it'd be helpful. Thank you, Mayor.
officers, 911 responders.
We'll go around this way. How about that?
You want me to go? Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, Mr. Jones, first, let me thank the staff for continuing to help us get AAA rating. I appreciate all the work that the budget team does. And I also want to thank the HR team. Christina does an amazing job with healthcare and helping us with trying to stay competitive. Marathon Health is probably a model for not just for the state, but for the nation, how our employees are able to get preventive care and get same-day appointments almost. I think that's a model that I have talked about with other elected officials throughout the throughout the state. And so I appreciate how we are continuing to invest in that, because prevention is the key here as we are trying to tackle our healthcare costs. With that, I want to talk about the budget pressures and I think a gap that we currently have. I know first we always look at analyzing our services and finding cost savings. That's the first step. This $7 million on slide number 24 in fiscal year 2026, could you elaborate on that $7 million? Slide 24.
Sure. I'll take the first shot at it. Councilmember Ashmore, what we do each year is we go to the departments before at the beginning of the budget process, and we know we're going to be at this point. And I want to talk a little bit about the gap. Normally, we would have a conversation about this in January, and typically the gap gets worse before it gets better.
Yes.
So we're like a month ahead of where we typically would be in terms of the gap, our starting point for FY2027 at $3.8 million. But the $7 million is just an exercise that we do annually to see if each department can be more efficient in their delivery of services. Sometimes it ends up deleting positions. Sometimes it ends up different departments sharing
no
resources.
layoffs, though. No layoffs.
So, what's that?
Oh, you said positions. I just want to make sure everybody knows.
Vacant.
No layoffs,
Exactly.
vacant positions.
Vacant positions. I will tell you that 2026, I think that this has really tested us. Many times the council says, before you come back for a property tax increase,
Right.
show me that you've done everything. I'm telling you, we've done just about everything. And what's happening now, we're starting to see a little bit of a decline in service, and that's what we don't want. We don't want our trucks to be in fleet longer, right? We're also having a lot of things happen over the course of the first 7 months of the fiscal year that has really had a drain on our resources, whether it's police and fire and overtime, or whether it's because of snowstorms and ice storms. So it's almost like a perfect storm for us right now. We're not, waving the flag or anything, but I do not believe that going back into the departments in FY27 and asking for that level of savings is really going to help us in the long run. What we are asking our departments is to consider technology. Right? How can we better use technology to deliver services? And that's top of mind for us. But that's, I hope I answered your question, Marie. Did I miss anything, leave anything out on that $7 million? Okay.
No, I think that's great because residents, anytime we are discussing property tax, they want to see what we have done to find cost savings, what we have done to streamline our processes before we go to them. So they certainly appreciate this number one step, just like we do in our household, right? When we had to find a way to figure out cost savings. So that's certainly good. Does this account for $20 to $30 million that we were giving to cats out of our general fund? So how we had operate.
Sure, I
Go
think
ahead.
you're talking about the maintenance of effort.
Yes, that's right.
But the maintenance of effort wouldn't be a part of this.
No. So that would be separate.
Right.
And one last thing, I know that state legislatures are discussing property tax and how they're finding ways to address how municipalities increase their property tax rates, right? And we need to certainly keep that into consideration as we plan, not just for today or for this fiscal year, but for 5, 10 years down the road. If you could answer that.
Thank you, Councilmember Edgemere. There's a couple of things, and I love it when Councilmember Driggs tells me, "I told you so," as he grins. So everybody knows how North Carolina works in terms of the reval. And so while we've been very diligent in keeping that tax rate revenue neutral, I think to some extent it has harmed us, because what we have is inflation, and we don't really account for the inflation when we make that rate revenue neutral. What's the right words to use? We are monitoring what's happening in both chambers now with the discussions around property taxes. As Marie showed you earlier, we've been quite diligent with one property tax adjustment in the last 7 years, and it really was for public safety and for our CIP. I don't know what the outcome will be from what's happening in Raleigh. I do believe that we are trying to focus on core services in this FY27 budget. I do believe at some point, we've been so good with this, I would hope that, which is not a strategy, that there would still be some flexibility at the local level to address property tax, to deal with growth, especially when you start to talk about core services, and especially when you talk about public safety, which is 61% of what we do in the general fund.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. My questions are really just because this is my first rodeo, and so I'm really just wanting some clarity. You spoke to the fact that the rating agencies look to see that reserves are funded each year and that their expectation is considerably less, about half of what we're doing. Can you give me some historical context? Have we always kept that 16%, and do we view that as being part and parcel of retaining our AAA rating, or where did we come to that number of wishing to double the amount of reserves that are suggested?
Sure. So the 16% is sort of 2 months of operating reserves in a lot of ways. So that's really making sure that when a snowstorm does come, we have reserves to be able to respond to that. So a lot of that is sort of in there. And a lot of it also has to do with looking at, there is a state sort of standard that we have to do, that's sort of the 8%. And that's really just about meeting a state statute for what you have to do to be able to even to have things like public referendums on debt, other types of things. The rating agencies are really setting what the best practice is and what it shows that we are a management AAA by managing to that level. So sort of that 60% sort of giving us those 2 months of reserve. So as things come up and down during the course of the year, you can also think about property tax primarily comes in the course of 1 to 2 months. It comes around sort of that December to January, but we're operating for 12 months of the year. So that 60% really helps us sort of manage throughout the entire year and deal with critical things that happen. And then I think, one of the things that happens just with, for example, today, the manager already flagging that we're having budgetary pressures, and we're managing to those already. We're not waiting till May. We're not waiting till June to start addressing those. So that's what sort of is really important when the rating agencies are looking at things, that we're maintaining both, that we're funding as our budget grows year to year. We continue to maintain that 60%, and that we're managing to those pressures throughout the year by getting ahead of them. Hope that helps.
Thank you. My other question is again, out of ignorance of how these processes are normally set. When you go to the compensation considerations and the police and fire, I just want to be clear that I'm understanding. I think this would be at slide, oh gracious, I don't have my slide in front of me. I guess it would be slide 31. I've heard various schools of thought with respect to payment of officers a bit more on par with one another, police and fire, and we don't quite do that, but I'm also seeing, I think, from the text that you've got here, that the fire is potentially under where it would be on a market analysis, and that, I'm sorry, police is under and fire is over. Is that, did I get that right?
In various ones, like Ethan, if you'll click back to the actual data from Melissa's group. So, and I'm speaking out of turn, we have our compensation specialist over here, Melissa Golding, who compiled these for us. But yes, so if you see, I want to stand up and point at it, but, so for the police recruits, if you're looking at recruits, yes, police is lower than both the national and the southeast.
Okay.
Whereas Charlotte, the trainee for a firefighter is not.
Okay. And I guess this is more perhaps a comment than a question, but I don't see either of those numbers being at the level of being able to afford an apartment or a home or something in Charlotte. So can you speak at all to I guess, the expansion of some of our programs? I'm assuming that some of what we're doing is helping with housing security for these essential workers?
I'm not sure that any public safety, but we can follow up and get data on if public safety employees have taken advantage of those or not.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
That's all I have.
Mr. Graham, do you want,
I'll pass.
Mr. Driggs?
Thank you, Mayor. So on police, I wanted to just clarify, we have vacancies, and the vacancies are funded positions. So we're actually paying for those. And that money is used, for the most part, to pay overtime to the officers that are filling in for the vacant officers. But what I've heard from the chief is that gets us back to a certain complement. I think what she's talking about is we need more officers than that. And in order to study that, you need to get into the details of how that determination was made, call times, and so on. So I think we're facing a big challenge because of the emphasis on public safety and then the goals of our chief. And that's something we're going to have to contend with in this cycle. She's also talked about the fact that they need a 10% pay increase, which I believe is consistent with some of what we're seeing here. So I will also mention, I've said for the last couple of budget cycles that I thought we were loading a gun for a tax increase. And I had a concern, being the last guy to vote for a tax increase, but if you're going to make spending commitments, you have to fund them.
That's true.
And you have to let the community know what the kind of hard part is of being able to do all the things that we do. It's got to be paid for. And letting yourself get behind just sets up even more difficult situation later. When is the next revaluation, Mr. Manager?
It's 2028.
Right.
FY2028.
So we're a couple of years away from being able, fiscal 28. So we're one budget cycle away from being able to adjust for, through the inflation mechanism. And in case anybody in the room isn't clear about the issue, state law requires that every time there is a revaluation, that we then look at our tax rate. And it says we have to disclose to the public what the adjustment in our tax rate would have to be in order for us to get the same amount of money we were getting or would have had before. We don't have to implement that tax rate, we must disclose it. So then we have a choice as to whether to actually reset to that rate or, as a matter of discretion, to increase the number to some, or decrease the number less than what the adjustment would be. And we have, in each case, we have adjusted in nominal terms. But that meant that our property tax number was frozen in nominal terms, and we were paying more for our expenses. So we were eroding the value of the proceeds from the property tax. And the point that I've been discussing with the manager was we need to try and address that and make clear that there is an objective basis for not resetting the nominal rate and going all the way back to the pre-inflation number, but for getting the benefit of inflation as we make that disclosure about the neutral rate. And the policy has not changed. The state policy hasn't changed. So it's going to be up to us to disclose as required and then explain our reasons for not doing that. But that is something that will occur in the next budget year. So this year, I believe that we are going to be facing a challenge on the property tax rate just because of things that are taking shape. You've seen this, the 3% pay increase that we would normally want to adds to the shortfall that has already been identified. We've worked our way through that in the past, but I'm just concerned that we are very lean right now. I mean, the manager said that we have seen some, decline in service delivery, and we need to keep up. So I'll probably vote against the budget, but I'm telling you, I think we need a tax increase.
For you to say that, Ed, I mean, like, we're really.
you're gonna vote against the budget.
Okay.
Like hour one.
Wow.
Just
I know.
kidding. Just in
I know,
case
but-
my Republican friends are listening.
We're listening.
So, there's one other thing I wanted to mention.
But can I say this, Ed? I think that you've really just hit it on the head, is that right now, when we have officers that are moving into other departments, it's because we are not doing the pay, a sufficient amount of pay to get people to do this work. And it's not anything that we thought was really, it's not we did it intentionally, but the world has caught up with us, and it's time for us to start thinking about that. And I think it's very, very important.
I believe, especially with the focus on public safety that we're
Exactly.
experiencing, we need to make meaningful steps that involve money and not just shuffling or brave words. So,
I wanted to tell you that this place that I went to, they had it was the most important policing place for everything that they wanted to have. Every toy was in there, everything was making it possible, and they knew Stella very well. So, that's how I think this is where it's going to land.
I guess the only other thing I was going to say was there is a history of comparing the rates for police and fire,
Yeah.
to your question. And the difficulty there is they are all first responders. They are all prepared to risk their lives for public safety. But the truth is that, especially in recent years, the life of a police officer has been tougher. Recruiting officers has been tougher. So the market for those things has been different. I talk to firefighters, and they're very happy to work for CFD. They have the equipment they need. It's a good life for them, good place to be a firefighter, and police everywhere, because of public sentiment. I think it has improved compared to a few years ago when we were in the aftermath of George Floyd and Keith Lamont Scott. But still, I don't think there's a presumption that those numbers are the same. So we always need to be mindful of the comparison, but not start from a point of they should be the same number. Thank you.
Councilman Mayfield?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And sometimes it is really not advantageous to go behind Councilmember Driggs. So, staff, thank you for a wonderful presentation. Manager Jones, I've also said now since I've been back on council that we have to have a real conversation regarding a tax increase based on the limitations that we have, even when we think of the corporate tax rate and the impact that could have if it was a higher rate that was coming back, and looking at our first responders that are not able to live in our city. So that means we may be paying you, but we're also having to adjust for travel time, transportation costs, and those taxes are going to our partners in the region. So I do appreciate that through concentrated effort with our housing trust fund, and the fact that we have to have a real conversation of coming back to the community, because there's not a feasible way to go back to 15 million, much less 50 million. We need to be bold enough to continue this $100 million conversation. But, every time we come to budget season, I am going to be the one to ask questions specifically for fire. So I appreciate the fact that we identified funding to start to look at the design of our training facility, because our training facility was extremely outdated, meaning, and specifically for our new colleagues, fires are very different today. The level, the intensity of a fire, because we've gone horizontal and we've gone higher and we've gone in much smaller spaces, 5 feet to less than 10 feet apart, that fire happens in seconds. So what we initially had was not really given proper training for our firefighters for the realities of what they were walking into. Yet, going back to one of the questions my colleague asked earlier, when we looked at that 7%, one of the other things that we also know is around this time of year, our manager has to send out to all the departments, hey, how can we look at cost reduction without layoffs? One of the ways that also plays out is with our fire, with out-of-pocket costs. So I correlated to the teacher that has to buy the school supplies, the basic things that are needed in the firehouse when we look at utensils, we look at whether or not the dishwasher works, the washing machine works, the different things. I had the chance, of which I'm going to be kicking back up after we get through the retreat, but I was touring, I think I managed to hit eight of our firehouses previously just to visit and to have conversation. That's concerning, that when we're looking at the cuts, how that impacts the employees, because the employees are already, we're not at the place where we can pay what we identify as a living wage for Charlotte. Yet, we do pay well. In a dream world, would we love to pay more? Yes, but I also don't want us to be the cause of more out of pocket. The cost of health care has gone up considerably. The city has stepped in and taken over a large part of that cost, yet those costs, specifically for our first responder families, is causing challenges. What I'm also happy about is that staff took it upon themselves and that previous council supported the recommendation when we had the extra funds for us to have money set aside to help our workers and families. Well, if they ran into financial challenges, whether it was housing and or medical related, I hope as we continue to have the discussions, even though we were able to use one-time funds, try to figure out if there is a way, whether there is through grants or something, to continue that to help lower the costs. But also, I want us to take into consideration when the ask goes out to the departments to look at cutting back, that we take into serious consideration what that impact can be, especially for me when we think of those out-of-pocket costs that our first responders and fire have to absorb, and is that something that they can really absorb versus something that really should be our responsibility, because that's all part of them having a quality of life and safety in their job capacity to the best of our ability. Thank you, Manager.
So, thank you, Mayor, members of council. And for both Councilmember Driggs and Councilmember Mayfield, a couple of things. First of all, thank you so much for focusing on the employees. I think that's really, really important. Matt, our CFO, talked earlier. We're in good shape as a city because Matt, I'm sure, doesn't want the rating agencies to think that right now we're in a crisis. We are not, okay? What I think is super important, just a few things, and I think these came out of the town hall, so I think it's really important. So Christina, how many folks were unhoused that were city employees that we've been able to help them get housing? 27, okay? So what you're doing is changing people's lives, right? So that's really important. About the reductions, I think, and I have to do this for all of the departments, we typically take police and fire out of that pool when we start doing reductions. So think about it, 39% of what's left from the departments is bearing a bunch of this. So, but Marie's giving me a look, so sometimes you go to police and fire.
I think Ms.
too.
Mayfield may be speaking to this current year, tightening up.
Okay,
Is that
okay.
gap, yeah.
I think the other thing with police that's important, that Chief Patterson and her predecessor believe that we can get these positions filled within the next 2 years. But to Mr. Driggs' point, even if we were at 1,900, we're not sure 1,900 is the correct number for a city of our size. So I think as we continue to have conversations about compensation. It's also how do we go about going beyond this 1,900 to get to another 400 potentially? And is there anything similar to what happened 32 years ago, where the federal government gave more money for COPS grants so that you can attract more people to the profession? What I would suggest is that it's not 100% when you get those COPS grants, but could there be something different in a legislative package, both state and federal, that gives more compensation or more money to the localities that are out there trying to recruit more police officers?
Okay, JD?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Manager Jones. Thank you, staff, for such a great presentation. I had some clarifying questions. And perhaps there's some answers that might not be responded to today, but I'm very curious to know the decrease from 2024 to 2025 on police recruitment. I would like to know, what are the factors that went into that? I know public safety has been huge for us. Oh, it's slide 30. Yeah, that one. Exactly. I would love to look into more about the factors that went into that decrease. And particularly in slide 31, there was a mention about cost of living adjustments not including, I think it's the next slide after this recruitment slide, cost of living adjustments not including in these numbers. Could I ask why they weren't included in this?
Yeah, this presentation is just the existing pay plan. So it's the current steps as they exist. Each year, a pay increase would adjust those steps and provide a market adjustment or cost of living adjustment, which would shift those steps. In FY26, that was 1.5%. We shifted those up.
Got it. Thank you. My thoughts are that we are the largest city in the state. We're the 14th going on 13th largest city in the country. And yes, we are at an inflection point where we really need to look at these pay discrepancies between our police, our fire departments, as well as the vacancies. What can we do better to be better recruiters? How can we adjust to the cost of living? The reality is that we're living in a very unique time in our country where federal funding is being cut. The state legislature is having different conversations about our jurisdiction with property taxes. Healthcare premiums are rising, and we are welcoming 157 people each day to our region, right? I think this is a moment where I get excited that I agree with a Republican colleague that yes, I think we need to, right? We need to have a conversation about tax increase and how we sustain the growth in our city, because we have done incredible work with our housing trust fund dollars. We have done incredible work at finding housing for our employees. We've been able to sustain this growth. But I think, to the mayor's point earlier, that growth is outpacing us a little bit, right? And we are now having some real conversations about how do we continue to be a competitive city and to continue to showcase our ability at being the drivers in the market, right? Whether it's housing, whether it's police retention, whether it's firefighters, whether it's our services, right? And it is a bit concerning that there has been a slight decline in service delivery, right? We are vying to be a footprint across the country, right? Not only are we trying to learn from our peer cities, we're trying to be the peer city that our peer cities learn from, right? And so I definitely think we need to start having more conversations about how can we get creative and how can we have serious dialogue about a potential tax increase to sustain the growth that this incredible city is seeing.
Dante?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, first and foremost, inflation has not been our friend over the last several years, and it won't continue to be. In addition, we are facing headwinds as it relates to state and federal policies that are upon us. And this particular topic is center of plate for all of us, as it should be, and we should be leaning into public safety rather than leaning out. So I just want to say that first and foremost, that's the tone. Now, as we have heard from our wonderful new chief, as it relates to the opportunities to fulfill vacancies and other things, we can't forget our sworn fire officers as well. It's not a difficult task for us to look at the numbers as it relates to our growth rate for a city and correlate that to the growth rate as it relates to the number of fire stations, the number of sworn fire officers, and yes, CMPD officers that we need to be bringing on board. So I don't want to leave one behind. I want both to grow instead and be in tandem, because as we talk about so often, the group of first responders, the very first responder is our fire department. They're there first and foremost. And so we need to make sure that every pocket, every corner of our city has the opportunity to have our wonderful sworn officers be there immediately. I agree with Mr. Driggs as well, although I will be raising my hand if it comes to that, because we have been a wonderful steward of taxpayer dollars, and our city manager has done that, as well as staff. But at this point, we're at a point of inflection, and due to inflation, compounded inflation over a series of years, as well as the outlook, we might be facing a situation that we have to increase taxes to double down on public safety as it relates to CMPD, as well as our sworn fire officers. So I want to say that we need to lean into this more. I don't want to leave our sworn fire officers behind. I want them to be in lockstep, even if it's at a percentage of rate rather than just regular dollars. They need to be in lockstep, because as we grow and continue to advance to be a top 10 city in the United States of America, we want to make sure that our fire officers are there with us, and we don't have the same vacancy trepidation that we do today. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Right.
Ms. Ajmira?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to follow up on Councilmember Mayfield's point about healthcare, because this is a concern that we have heard from our employees as we are looking at our healthcare insurance premiums that are rising, our out-of-pocket costs are rising, and that's not because of the city. I mean, this is an issue that municipalities across the nation are increasingly concerned about. So I'm glad that we are doing sort of comparison in terms of the pay, but can we also look at some sort of a health insurance comparative study, and how are we aligning with peer cities? I'm not sure if that is also a contributing factor to our recruitment and retention, but I would like to think it is. So if we can have that as part of the overall study, I think that would help us understand the gaps. I certainly appreciate the work that HR has done to figure out where we are in terms of the pay, but I think having benefits as part of the overall study would certainly help us. Also, I just saw Councilmember Johnson, and it reminded me about response times. So certainly, Mr. Driggs brought this up earlier about Chief Patterson's point that even if we were to fill all the vacancies at CMPD, are we really where we should be? And we know the answer to that. But I think one data point that can help us answer that question is emergency response time. I know we had done that a couple of years ago because we were getting calls and emails about how it was taking longer time for our CMPD and CMPD specifically to respond. And I think contributing factor was high vacancy rate among dispatchers. And it looks like based on the graph that you had presented earlier, we have been able to address that with the pay increases. But having that data set would certainly help us. How far have we come along in terms of emergency response time? We had that benchmark that cities across the nation try to get to that benchmark, and we were just a little bit behind. But I would like to see from all the actions that council has taken, have we really made a meaningful difference in that response time? Because at the end of the day, if someone calls 911, we got to make sure we are not meeting that benchmark, we are exceeding that benchmark. If someone is having a heart attack, or if someone's, their house got broken into, we got to make sure that CMPD is there in no time. So if we can get that data point, that would be appreciated, as well as how are we doing on dispatcher vacancy. And last, I agree with you. I think we have Mr. Jones, we have law enforcement, retention and recruitment as part of our state and federal legislative agenda. And I think any help from federal and state will certainly relieve pressure, because we can print more money like the federal government does. So certainly I think any outreach and intentional lobbying effort could certainly help us there as well. That's all right. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Graham asked to speak, and then we'll follow up, Ms. Mayfield.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I intentionally wanted to kind of do a lot more listening than talking. My first time kind of chairing the committee, and I think there's some consensus around the room on some issues in reference to public safety for sure, and treating our firefighters in the same vein as our police officers, which I think is extremely important that we do. I think we all acknowledge the growth that the city is experiencing, and how do we pay for it through a wide variety of city services that we are providing to the constituents. But I guess my question was, in terms of as we begin to transfer employees out of the city via transportation, I mean, the impact that will have on the benefits, if any, at all, Mr. Manager.
So, thank you, Councilmember Graham. Can I try to do two things? Councilmember Ashmira, you asked about response times. We have done some things with 911 callers from CMPD. We have a data point, which is January, which is not a trend, but we did some things in December, and January was really, we met our goals. First time in a while, so let's see how those things happen. And also with response times, we're building, that's why it's so important to continue to build the fire stations. It's very different than law enforcement, excuse me, policing, right? And so as we do that, that helps with the response times. And we hadn't talked about this in a while, but there's a study, I think the chief's still in here. There's a study going on with Medic, and how we go about dispatching has a big impact on fire and police. And so, Councilmember Graham, I actually had a conversation with Councilmember Owens this morning, and with this transfer of employees from the city to the MPTA, our number one priority is to take care of our employees. And if we do this the right way, it should be seamless. Their last day at the city should be no different than their first day at the authority. Healthcare is something that right now I can't tell you if that will be the same, right? Because we have such volume with 9,000 employees and their families. But as we go through this, we will try to limit the impact of those employees. The other thing I would say to you is, those employees typically of authorities are compensated more than somebody who works for a city government. So there's going to be a lot of, I guess, pluses and minuses, I shouldn't say it that way. But I think that as we move forward, we're going to make sure that we take care of our employees, but their benefits will be a part of the authority providing benefits and not the city of Charlotte providing benefits, whatever those are, compensation, health care. But they will stay in the retirement system.
And impact on our budget once they leave in terms of the cost to those employees that remain.
Yeah, we're looking at that. Sheila's in the room. I'm not going to pull her on the spot right now. But those are the kinds of things that is a part of this transfer. It's our assets, our debt, is all of those things, and how the impact would be to the city's budget. If there's something that's outright cost for the city to provide something for the authority, our intent is to recoup that cost.
Well, again, I think we've got some very broad issues, right, in terms of how we move forward.
All right. Ms. Dante?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And so, City Manager, I think, these opportunities, when we look at it from a budgetary perspective, vacancies are a challenge, and we're always looking to fulfill them. However, they do create fiscal opportunities to invest in other spaces and other programs. It would behoove us to think about some of the things that the vacancies have allowed us to invest in over the last couple of years, that as we increase the populate those vacancies, that might decrease the opportunity to invest in certain areas, and the level of import for those spaces as well. And as we think about, we were talking about police and fire here, but as we think about the transition of employees to the new transit authority, I think that would create a whole new pocket of opportunity from us, from a city perspective, to look at how we can reinvest, double down, and align in other spaces. So as we're looking at a forward-focused budget, I'd be interested in seeing and talking about those opportunities. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Ms. Mayfield? Ms.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to ask the manager, because my colleague, Councilmember Ajmir, did mention 911, which I look at as separate from the police and fire conversation. Are we going to have, and since we have the budget discussions in parts, are we going to have time for that conversation?
Yes.
Because I do have a resident that reached out Sunday. We do really need to look at those numbers, because just recently, unfortunately, some of us may have saw on the news a pretty bad motorcycle accident that happened like within the last 2 weeks, but they actually, unfortunately, witnessed the accident and saw the impact of the individual and the actual motorcycle, and the experience with calling for assistance, first being put on hold, then finally getting through, and the questions that they were being asked were not helpful, considering you just witnessed. So it would be helpful if, when that time comes for us to have that discussion, we get the most up-to-date numbers and call times. Thank you.
Mr. Driggs?
Thank you, Mayor. It's interesting. I remember a few years ago, a deputy chief of CMPD explained to our committee what the basis was for determining the target manpower levels. And that deputy chief was so impressive. I thought that lady is going places, and she did, all right? It was Chief Patterson, now Chief Patterson. But what she explained then was that there is a pretty complicated process through which calls are prioritized in order of immediacy and urgency, and then the responses to those calls are tracked according to target times for response. And then the question is, what does it take to stay within those target response times in each category with the manpower that's on call, on duty, right? Because then you've got to gross up from there to the total manpower you need. And that led to this number. But Mr. Manager, just a question. I don't know if you offhand, do you know when the last time that calculation was updated?
Yeah, so the, again, one data point is not a trend. We did some big changes in December. In the January data point, we were within 90% of calls being answered within 10 seconds.
So that's a high percentage. It leaves still a lot of room for unsatisfactory experiences. So really, if that's the way we're going to determine our manpower requirement, then we should be at 100. So I'm just saying these conversations are related, right? The response time question, the manpower question, it all ties in because response time is how we determine the target level of manpower. Thank you.
All right. Renee?
Thank you. I just want to piggyback off the whole 911 hold time. I know that Mr. Jones, you and I had a meeting, I want to say it was before COVID, about hold times for 911 callers. So I know there's new technology that's available for 911. There's text to 911. And I've had a consultant reach out to me. So if we're looking at new technology or upgrading the technology we have, I think we've talked about it. There might be a way to optimize that. But yeah, I definitely support not just getting up to current staffing level, but really taking a look at where we should be for staffing in our emergency services, CMPD, Charlotte Fire. And again, as a large city, and I've said this before, you know, it is time for change. We're a big city, so the small town charm is nice, but we want to have big city policies. So if we could stop looking at peer cities and seeing what they're doing and seek to be a leader so that organizations and cities are, you know, following us. I'm also happy to see that we're looking at Charlotte Fire. We've heard from Charlotte Fire and the firefighters union for years. So I'm happy that that we're seeking equity there, and I look forward to reviewing the budget. Thank you.
Here, can I do one thing to clarify? So, thank you. The standard for police departments across the country is to answer 90% of your 911 calls within 10 seconds. And we made that in January. Okay. So I just want to make sure that I'm saying this the right way. And so, again, one data point doesn't make a trend, but we believe some of the changes, including technology back in December, is helping. And the way we've changed the whole pay structure to make sure that people have career ladders and things of that nature. Part of our problem has been we can't retain them. So we train folks and then they leave, and then you're at the deficit again of trying to train folks. So we've listened to the council. You're right. We started talking about this well before COVID, and we're trying to make sure, just like we've been able to tackle some other problems that with staffing and retaining folks, trying to do the same thing with 911.
So when you talk about retention, I know CMPD has always had a high turnover rate. Are we looking at that from an HR perspective? Retention rates and organizational culture? Organizational culture survey might answer some of the questions of why we're not retaining such essential employees. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments?
Just one last comment, if I may, Madam Mayor. So I know you're looking at the data in 10 seconds or less where we are responding to a call. What I would like to see a data, how fast they're at the location, right? I mean, I think that both data points are equally important. That's all.
Okay.
All right, I think that if everyone has had an opportunity, staff, Marie, let's go to the capital investment plan.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of council. My name is Hannah Bromberger. I'm the Deputy Director of Strategy and Budget, and it's good to be back with you today. It's been a while since we've gotten a chance to talk about the capital program. So I have just a few slides today, and really the intent is just to sort of refresh and do a little bit of a level set on the way that our capital program is currently structured. And then I'm going to be back with you a week from today with Matt Hastett, our finance officer, and we'll be going a little bit deeper on the capital program and how we incorporate the new Article 34 revenue into the capital model. So just to start us off, an overview of the capital investment plan. It is really a public communication tool. So it presents the city's plan to the community. We fund different kinds of projects out of the capital investment plan, including street improvements, we build facilities, we maintain facilities, and all of the projects that are in the capital investment plan come from data-driven exercises or from studies, plans, community engagement. So they all originate from the work that our staff does. These funds are life to date. So unlike our operating, which goes away at the end of the fiscal year, these funds do not. So they roll forward. The idea is that a capital project extends longer than 1 year, so the funding rolls forward. And if debt is utilized, the life of the asset needs to extend longer than the financing itself. We put together a 5-year plan every year that's part of the budget book. Year 1 of that plan is adopted by City Council and appropriated. The 4 out years of that plan are simply a plan. So we revisit them every year with Council, and there's an opportunity to adjust them annually. The general capital investment plan is supported by general government revenues, primarily property and sales tax, while the enterprise capital investment plans are supported by enterprise revenues, so by the user fees themselves. So if I'm in front of you, we're generally talking about the general capital investment plan and not the enterprises. So there are 2 main components of the capital investment plan. The first one is PAYGO. So PAYGO, or pay-as-you-go funding, is used for projects and programs that aren't reoccurring or that aren't eligible for debt. So this is where we test a lot of things. This is where we put pilot programs. In recent years, you've seen things like pilots to reduce juvenile crime, some of our affordable housing programs like our NOAA subsidies. All of those are in PAYGO. And about 30% of PAYGO funding relies on the closeout from the last full fiscal year. So, Marie was in front of you about an hour ago talking about how tight FY25 closed. I think if you look at the 3 prior fiscal years, on average, it was about 14 million that rolled into PAYGO. Because of how tight FY25 closed, we've got about 10,000 rolling into PAYGO. So essentially nothing for that 30% of revenue. These are cash-funded projects, and the PAYGO program is appropriated annually, but again, it's a 5-year plan. So you appropriate year 1, and the 4 out years are a plan. So the second main component of the capital investment plan is our municipal debt service fund. And so the municipal debt service fund is how we pay principal and interest on debt. And we have a couple main types of debt. The first one is certificates of participation, or COPs. And COPs are used for facility construction and improvements. So think of this like your mortgage. And this pledges the asset for the debt. And because it does that, it does not require voter approval. We appropriate COPS annually. Again, it's a 5-year plan. You appropriate year 1, and the 4 out years are a plan, so you revisit them annually. And we model COPS, we model this debt on a steady state capacity. So basically, we look long-term at the revenues that we anticipate and the expenditures that we anticipate, and we have a steady amount every year available to budget. The other kind of debt in the Municipal Debt Service Fund is general obligation bonds. We have 3 types of bonds: affordable housing bonds, neighborhood bonds, and transportation bonds. And these bonds do require voter approval. So they leverage the full faith and credit of the City of Charlotte, which means that they pledge to raise property tax if it's needed to pay for our debt service obligations. Again, that steady state modeling is really important here. We consider decades at a time in our model. We anticipate revenues, we anticipate expenditures, and so we can plan for our bonds so that we don't have to raise taxes. Our bonds are typically presented to the voters every other year, and they're in even calendar years. So 2026, or this upcoming budget, FY27, is a bond year. So if council approves the bonds as part of the budget, then they'll be presented to the voters in November. So we talked about a lot of pieces. We've talked about the capital investment plan, municipal debt service fund, projects, funding sources. This graphic puts it all together into a nice little story. So we have revenues on the left. For the municipal debt service fund, it's primarily property tax and sales tax. And then there's a few other revenues that make up a lesser percentage. Those revenues go into the municipal debt service fund, which then pays principal and interest on our various types of capital projects. So I want to talk a little bit more about steady state modeling, because this is really important. We introduced it in 2018, and it supports our long-range capital planning. So we model those anticipated revenues versus the anticipated principal and interest of our expenditures, and we use that to determine our capacity. And what we have done by making it steady state is we have modeled it so that we have the same amount of capacity every year. And really what this does is it helps us stay really rooted in this policy-driven, sustainable level of borrowing. And then the other thing is when council is elected on 2-year terms, what it does is one council's decision on how much capacity to borrow for the CIP doesn't tie the hands of a future council to have to raise property taxes in order to fund a CIP. So it ensures the predictability into future years. And if you'll remember, the last steady state discussions that we had, which were a long time ago, but the last ones that we had were $220 million for our bonds in the planned out years. So this, if you looked in the budget book right now, this is a prettier, more colorful version of what you would see on the bond schedule. But when you look at the planned 2026 and the planned 2028 bonds, this is where you see that steady state of $220 million. And so this is from the originally FY 2025, also it's in the FY 2026 book. And what's hard to miss is the $400 million bond that was approved in 2024. So we had $100 million for housing. We had $300 million for transportation and neighborhood bonds. We were able to increase every program within the bond. And this was really unprecedented. This was a historic level of investment for us. And we couldn't accomplish it without taking some action. Some of those we've already talked about today. We did 0.24 cents of a property tax increase, and we also pulled forward some of that out-year capacity, and all of this was to enable the $400 million bond. We included a new program in that bond called the Strategic Investment Areas for $55 million. And this was really important to deliver projects to the community quickly. We made a commitment that we would deliver on these within 2 years, and we're on track to do so. But also, this was really important for us to test our own organizational capacity and find where we might have weaknesses. Because remember, at this time, the PAVE Act hadn't been approved. And so we wanted to make sure that if it were approved, that we were prepared for a consistently higher bond amount. And so what we know now is that the PAVE Act was, of course, enacted July 1st, 2025, last summer. Voters authorized it in November, and so FY2027 will be the first fiscal year that we have to contemplate Article 34, this new sales tax revenue, as part of our budget. And so we know that 40% of that revenue is dedicated to roadway system per the legislation. And for Charlotte, we anticipate that that is a little over $100 million in the early days. And when I say $100 million, I mean cash revenue coming in. And so to turn that $100 million of cash into even more capacity, we can put it into a debt model. But what's really important here is that the PAVE Act has some language around using this revenue to supplement and not supplant or replace local expenditures on roadway systems. And so the PAVE Act tells us how to calculate it. It tells us, it defines it. And so we will, of course, follow the law. But the PAVE Act is also explicit that the local expenditure calculation does not apply to the proceeds of indebtedness. So meaning the expenses in our municipal debt service fund. And so as we begin to explore how we incorporate this revenue into the debt service fund, we're going to talk more about that next week at the retreat. We're going to review some proposed updates to the debt service fund to make sure we're in alignment with the PAVE Act. We're going to discuss debt capacity, and we're going to highlight some of our debt management principles that we need to keep in mind that really help support us being a AAA city. And then we're going to draw connections to how it relates to PEGO and operating funds as well. So as we look ahead, of course, next week, next Monday, Tuesday, we have the retreat. Then next Thursday, we'll have our budget committee meeting where we'll have some of our enterprises come and begin to discuss their budget. We'll be back in front of you a month from today on March 23rd for another workshop. And then in April, we have another budget committee where some more enterprises will begin discussing their budget. And then ultimately, the city manager will propose the budget to you on May 4th and turn it over to you for budget adjustments.
All right, any questions or comments? Mr. Jones has a few.
So thank you, Mayor, members of council. Hannah, can you go back to slide 43, the planned bond schedule? Oh.
Oop.
There we go, awesome.
Nope.
Okay, so we appreciate the council's willingness to go to $400 million, the last bond. What's important about that is that it gave us a 2-year lead time to test how we will be able to implement projects. I will tell you, in this budget, that won't be a business as usual. We'll need to have some level of additional resources, whether you call them staffing, to make sure we're implementing these projects. The other thing that's really important is that what we will present to you at the retreat or subsequent budget meetings is a planned steady state that's going to be higher than 220. Is that fair? That's right. It'll be higher than 220, but it will have all the principles that we've always had with a steady state to begin with. And that's what's exciting for all the planners and all the engineers and everybody, and Phil Rieger, and everybody who's been waiting to have an opportunity to make great infrastructure investments in our community.
Any other comments or questions? I do think that what you've said was really important because we went out for that bond and to make it possible for the opportunity to have the mobility money come in. I think a lot of us said, here's what we will do and how we will accomplish it. And I think that is a real requirement for all of us. All right, Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. I just have a question. On slide, I guess it's 41. Other revenues is mentioned. Can you give us an idea of what revenues those are?
Sure, that's like interest earned. And there's some other small revenues, but they don't amount to much.
Okay, so this is just for the CIP structure. Okay, because I wanted to ask about the hospitality taxes. Where are those listed in the budget?
That is not part of the general CIP.
Okay, so when will we receive information about that?
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. So I think the hospitality funds are within the hospitality funds themselves. So I'm not sure if that is a planned presentation to council as opposed to the manager's budget presentation. But I do believe that next week at the strategy session, there will be a detailed discussion about the hospitality program and some of the Horizon projects that are upcoming.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Ms. Kimberly?
Thank you, Mayor. I had a question about Vision Zero. I've had a couple of inquiries from the community around the transparency around the expenditures that we've made. If you go back to the budget on that, I don't know that I see the dashboard as necessarily capturing that degree of transparency. Is there some intention to upgrade our reporting with regard to those expenditures and furtherances of Vision Zero?
Sure, yes. And we will actually, when we're back with you a month from today, on March 23rd, we're going to talk about active projects. And so council will get a full report out of all of the sub-projects within that program and the state of them. And so we can talk more about that there, but we do plan to talk more about everything that is currently active next month.
Thank you.
And sorry, just so I can add, I know Hannah's taught me this in the past too. When people look at that pot of money, that's upfitting current infrastructure. It's important for the community to also understand any new investments already include those Vision Zero considerations. So this is more enhancing current infrastructure. Am I saying that right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So that, so when the community looks at this amount of money, that's not all it is. That's helping current infrastructure. But anything new already has that embedded.
No, and understood, and I appreciate that. I think the inquiry that I've received has been around the bounds of what things that we've done and how we've categorized and prioritized the expenditures of those monies with respect to either some of the lighter touch things that can be done immediately in the aftermath of an accident, such as restriping or just some of the things that are perhaps lesser dollar amounts, and how that budget's being expended. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Mayor. And Councilmember Owens, we will have a set-aside discussion at the annual strategy meeting next week that includes Vision Zero and how we can prioritize some projects.
All right, JD?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks for the presentation, and I have two questions. The first one is very similar, if not the exact same request from Councilmember Owens for corridors of opportunity to see how we've used that money, how we dispersed it in the community. So that's something I would be very interested in learning next week in the annual strategy session. I had a question of clarification back to the 1 cent sales tax slide. You had mentioned that we wouldn't use those funds for the proceeds of indebtedness, but that we will find ways to apply to the debt service fund?
Yes, so the PAVE Act is specific that this revenue is to supplement and not supplant local expenditures on roadway systems, except when derived from indebtedness. So it excludes the municipal debt service fund. So really, when it goes on to define it, it talks about, it's really like our general fund or our PAYGO expenditures on roadway systems. And they ask us to average our spending over the last 10 years.
Got it. Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks. All right. Dimple?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So to follow up on that, you talked about the average over the last 10 years to Councilmember Masuraria's question. That's not, from what I understood, that's not operating, that's not capital, that's the operating number, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so that's what you will provide us at the retreat, what that number is?
No, I believe they're talking
The average
about,
over the last 10 years in the operating.
I think they're talking about the actual projects that are being delivered. But just to give example of surplanting, you know, when we had that pie chart up that showed the general fund budget and like 14 million for street lighting. Street lighting is considered roadway systems as defined within the act. We couldn't take part of that penny and pay for that 14 million because it is part of the general fund.
Yes, I get
So-
that. I guess what my question is, in the PAVE Act, where this PAVE Act money, where we have to spend average of last 10 years on transportation-related projects. I'm trying to find out what that average 10-year number is that we have to continue to spend on transportation.
Thank you. And then we can look at that, but to us, that's not as applicable because we're not reducing our spend.
Right.
You know, so
I
just as long as you don't reduce your spend,
I
you're
just
not
want to make sure,
supposed-
we are not reducing, I just want to know what that number is. And certainly, I'm sure we will get at the retreat, we are going to get the new steady state, which will be at much higher than where we are at currently, 220 million. That was based on previous year. So the request that was made by some of my colleagues about Vision Zero, I think that's what I'm thinking about is more independent from the budget cycle. Cycle is just the dashboard. So regardless of what happens during the annual allocation time for the budget, I guess just more friendly dashboard of where the projects are. So remember how you gave us this, at every budget cycle, we get this long spreadsheet that has like all the projects. But that's not what's showing on the dashboard. But the one we get, it's more master list. It's not just Vision Zero. It's everything and everything, including facilities. So I guess in order for the Vision Zero dashboard to be more user-friendly, I think what I would like to see, aside from the budget, is what projects have been completed, what projects are underway, what phase of the project is underway, and what's the timeline. I think that's what I'm looking at in terms of Vision Zero and high injury network dashboard, aside from budget.
Okay.
And lastly, on slide number 46, okay, if you can help me understand what updates would be needed to the municipal debt service fund as a result of a new sales tax revenue.
Sure. We'll go pretty deep on this next week. But the PAVE Act can only be used for roadway systems. And right now, the model in the Municipal Debt Service Fund builds our facilities, it's our affordable housing bonds, it's our transportation and neighborhood. So we need to be real intentional about carving out space for that revenue to ensure that we are complying with the PAVE Act.
That's fair. So any of this $100 million that we will get every year, can it be used to issue a bond to increase our capacity?
Yes.
Okay. All right, that's all I have. I'll have more once I see the steady state, but that's all for now. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? All right, so, Mr. Jones, do you have any wrap-up for us?
No, Mayor, I just appreciate the input that we're getting from the council. I think this has been one of the most productive sessions we've had early on with the budget workshop. And so I think it actually will help us when we get back together next week to talk more budget.
I accept so I understand that are you going to be excusing yourself?
Oh, you want to do it now?
Well, we can do it now. I think it'd be easy enough. So our next meeting is coming up. So what time, where is our time?
At 5.
At 5, and it's now 5:30. So let's get ready for that information.
What are you doing?
No, Mayor, it's 4 o'clock.
Oh, it's 4.
No, she said
Oh,
the
my
next-
gosh. I looked at my watch and it said 5. I was like, oh, my watch is really fast. So, okay.
got a whole hour.
All right, you have an hour for lunch or going doing anything that you want to do.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Madam Attorney, is there anything we need to do?
Oh, is there?
Anything she needs to do with this meeting?
No, I don't, I
We
think
just stop?
it was, wait a minute, I wasn't told that we had to have,
You're not doing this?
what is that?
The MSD.
Oh, sorry,
the
thank you.
MSD
Thank
was
y'all
the
for bringing
other-
that up. That's my
sorry.
fault. I did want to mention that we need consensus to allow the municipal service district to move forward with the community engagement. Thank you so much for reminding me on that.
City partners.
Would it
Yes.
be all of them?
That's what I wanted to clarify. I
So,
thought-
Go ahead.
okay, Mr. Jones,
So moved.
just one university city?
Just the university city, and this is just the first phase. No, ma'am, Ms. Yasmir, we weren't talking about discussing it. They're going to go away and do community engagement and then come back.
So,
Or just the
is that,
hearing?
does that meet your requests?
Oh, I thought there was a presentation, but
Well,
Adjourn this meeting.
we're going to adjourn this meeting. All right, so all in.
And just to clarify, so I have
Do you have what you
consensus to
need?
move forward with the community engagement for university city partners.
Move to adjourn our budget session.
Councilman Johnson made the motion. I second it.
All right, so now you have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Raise your hands.
Voting on to continue.
You think
No,
doing that?
no, that is for.
No, that's what our attorney just said, that we needed to, because we started jumping
We
into
need to
this
close
whole other
this.
conversation that was
We got to
outside
close budget and then open.
This is part of the budget. I'm sorry, this was part of the budget.
Are we closing budget and then opening on MSD and giving her authorization for them to do community engagement? Or,
This is part of the budget, she said.
I thought so too, so.
Yeah.
No, I was just simply saying, close this meeting. I don't think we're going into the MSD portion, are we?
Thought you
Yes, we
No,
are.
we just needed consensus to move forward with the MSD.
Okay, before we get to that motion, the motion to adjourn the meeting, then, do you have consensus? You're asking for consensus.
So if we're not in a budget meeting, we can't just have a meeting, right? Just an open meeting for one vote
It'd be this hard.
We haven't closed the budget.
before we close the budget. Good, okay, okay.
Do we need
Okay.
a motion or
We-
we just
I-
should do consensus?
We do have a motion, and we have a second.
Correct.
And so all in favor, please raise your hands. This part of the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.